And we are joined by Alison Sargent in the studio. Good to see you, Alison.
Hi, Delano.
You know, here in France over the past few days, the papers have been dominated by that brutal beheading of French teacher Samuel Paty, and still making this headline today.
That's right, Donna. This Wednesday, a lot of papers are focusing on teachers and the struggle they face addressing Islamist extremism with their students. When it comes to secularism, we're walking on eggshells every day. That's how one teacher described their experience to Libération. The paper spoke to a number of teachers who described being left on their own to face sometimes aggressive students and hostile parents. Libération reports that the killing of Samuel Paty has caused a lot of them to really start to question their teaching practices. A Catholic paper La Croix, meanwhile, writes that this is a fine line teachers have been walking in France for the past 30 years. They say since a first disagreement over headscarves came up back in 1989. The sign that teacher is holding on La Croix's front page says, "Pas de vague," basically don't make any waves. A response many teachers say they've gotten from their administrators when they try and signal concerns they have about the radicalizations of their students. A right-wing paper, Le Figaro, meanwhile, calls for an end to this omerta, this law of silence, in its editorial today. The paper also writes that teachers in France don't want to be secular martyrs, a message that we should note comes as Samuel Paty is set to be honored in a ceremony at the Sorbonne and basically made a symbol of French values.
Indeed, shifting gears next, you're heading to Canada, Nova Scotia in particular, where there's a lobster war breaking out.
That's right. This region of Canada has a very lucrative lobster industry. And as the New York Times explains, this war pits commercial fishermen against indigenous fishermen. It began recently when a First Nation opened its own fishery and began fishing lobster outside of the federal season, which doesn't start until the end of November. Since then, there have been attacks on indigenous fishermen. The paper describes how one man was terrorized by a mob of commercial fishermen who urinated in his car and ransacked his lobster plant. The plant was later burned to the ground in what is being investigated as an arson attack. The New York Times notes that this all comes amid a very broader national reckoning that's happening in Canada over racism against the indigenous population in other areas like healthcare and law enforcement.
It's awful. Now, the Canadian press has been expressing horror at the conflict.
The front pages for today weren't out yet, but we can look at the front page of Tuesday's Chronicle Herald, a paper out of Nova Scotia. Their front page columnist talks about how this is just the latest blow to what they call the province's damaged reputation for tolerance. The paper also talks about the chaos and confusion that reigns around government policy when it comes to Indigenous rights to hunt and fish. And in an editorial, the Globe and Mail, another Canadian paper, writes that the First Nations fishermen should absolutely keep that right. But they say other fishermen do have a reason, are able to expect that right of Indigenous fishermen be regulated so that lobster stocks can be preserved, or maybe commercial fishermen could receive financial compensation from the government. The bottom line for the Globe and Mail is that it's the Canadian government's job to step in and regulate this problem so that the fishermen can focus on fishing and live in harmony.
Now, another one of the top stories today, which we've been following here on France 24, is, of course, the antitrust case filed against Google by the U.S. government. The story has a lot to do with the dangerous power of big tech firms. Staying with that theme, artificial intelligence, so you found a story, is capable of creating fake nude photos of women.
Yeah, this is
men, I assume, too.
Actually, but interestingly, this article only talks about women, and so I assume this technology has only been creative to create fake nudes of women, which wouldn't be the first time that women specifically are targeted by technology. This technology takes clothed photos of women and undresses them using AI that's trained using databases of actual nude photographs of women. The Washington Post reports that 100,000 photos have been subjected to this treatment, including photos, they say, of underage girls. Now, this service, if you can call it that, allows users to place orders on an automated chatbot on Telegram. An internal poll found that an internal poll of that app found that roughly 63% of people who are doing this wanted to undress girls or women that they knew in real life. And the Washington Post notes that this really signals a dark shift in how AI technology is used. We've gone from faking celebrity images to targeting unsuspecting women who are far from the public eye. The paper says that it really opens the door to a new age of fabricated revenge porn against everyday people. involved.
Sounds creepy.
Yeah, creepy, scary stuff.
Indeed. And now the last story out of the United States. Of course, the election is just under 2 weeks away. Now, two rival candidates in the state of Utah have put out a joint ad. How is this even possible?
I know, right? This seems like this is the fake story, right? These two men are running for governor, and they jointly released this campaign ad calling for civility. They said, we can debate issues without degrading each other's character. We can disagree without hating each other. Just some of the phrases from this video that we don't hear often in the U.S. anymore. The Hill notes, though, that Utah has not had a Democratic governor since 1985, and this race is not a close one. The Republican candidate, Spencer Cox, has a more than 20-point lead over his Democratic challenger. I think it might be harder to imagine such a pleasant, unified message if the race was maybe a little tighter, a little more competitive. I don't know, Delano, maybe Trump and Biden, similar announcement coming soon?
Imagine them putting out a joint campaign video together. Never, ever, never in 100 years. Alison, thank you very much for that. Alison Sargent there with today's press review. You can check out other editions of our press review on our website. The address is france24.com. That's it from me, from all of us on the team. Thank you very much for watching.